Hello world and true believers. This is Brenda, a lost Aspie girl, and today I wanted to make a video like this. This is actually gonna be a second part to my mind blindness video. I'm also going to touch a little bit on the literal brain and um, anxiety and some of the behaviors that 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 develop due to ASD. So the reason I wanted to make a second video is I've been thinking about mind blindness a lot, and I realized I touched upon a lot of things in my initial video. I gave some anecdotal reports and everything like that, and the reasons, like how it affects us. But I kind of was thinking about I think that gave insight into other people with ASD to relate to, but I don't think it really gave enough insight for people with the social brain or neurotypicals or neurosocials as I like to call them now. Insight into how we think of why we're mind blind. And so I was thinking about it, and I feel like a really good analogy is imagine someone who is colorblind, and they're colorblind from they're little, and people want them to see colors, and they decide like we're going to teach them to see colors, and they put them in a maze, and they give them directions to like go down this row with red and then go down the one that's green and then go, and of course they keep getting it wrong because they can't see colors. But if you subject them to that maze long enough, their brain is gonna compensate, and they're gonna figure out how to go down the right maze. But then all of a sudden you put them in a new maze with different colors, and then they have to figure that out. But if you keep subjecting them to different mazes with different colors, they're probably going to start getting it right 60% of the time. Because like any type of blindness, your other parts of your brain begin to overcompensate. Whether you're blind and your senses become more astute, more sensitive. Like if you're blind, if your eyes are blind and you can't see, then your sense of smell becomes stronger. Your hearing becomes more astute. And acute, like, or whatever. So it would be the same thing if you're colorblind and you keep putting into mazes. But the other thing that's going to happen, so imagine you put it in these mazes, and each time you get it wrong, you're ridiculed or you're punished for the behavior. Like when you start to develop behaviors because of this, because when you start to melt down, like every time you got it, like it wouldn't be so frustrating for you. I mean, imagine living in a world where you're colorblind and the world that you live in is all colors, and people keep trying to force you to live, to follow the only way to get to anything. If you want to find food, you have to follow these colors. If you want to do this, and they keep thinking that it's something that can be taught. And then you have behaviors because of it, because you're melting down and you're freaking out, and it's overstimulating you, and then you get in trouble for this. And they keep focusing on the symptoms and the behaviors and trying to make you see the colors without actually looking at the root of the problem, which is the fact that you're colorblind and you're living and everything that in the world is told that you have to follow is by color. That's how it is for us. So there's like I like to think of it as like a social collective. Like if there's a group of people talking, it's like they all sync to each other, and there's like this social collective where they know where the pauses are immediately. They know where to talk, and they all sync to each other, and it's almost like their speech syncs up. It's like there's an ebb and flow to it. It's fascinating to watch. Or like I mentioned in the last video of how if I'm walking with a group of people, they all seem to know when to turn or whatever, and I'm always kind of stumbling around not knowing where to go. And if you don't have access to this, then of course things are going to be much more literal to you, because you're not seeing, you're blind to all these social nuances that everybody else seems to have access to. And because you're using a whole different part of your brain. But that part of your brain is going to begin to overcompensate. So from when you're little, if you only have that part of your brain, the logic part of your brain, the brain that solves puzzles to understand people, then after a while, your brain is going to begin to overcompensate. You're going to find other ways to understand people, which is good, but at the same time, you still don't have access to what everybody else has access to. You're still blind to what everybody else is seeing. So you probably only get it right 60% of the time. But for us, because if like someone like me, I look normal and I figured a lot of things out. So I get it right most of the time. But then the things that I get wrong, I'm more harshly punished for, because like you're getting it right all these other times, like, why aren't you getting it right here? What they're not understanding is that it's just that I figured certain things out, but that doesn't mean I'm able to see what you guys see. Again, like, it's like if I found my own coping way of distinguishing between green and red, that doesn't mean I'm able to see green and distinguish it from red. It's just I found a way at certain times to be able to distinguish between the two. That doesn't mean I know that this one's green and that one's red all the time. And if you keep putting me in mazes and changing it up and everything like that, because social nuances and things, it fluctuates. The rules aren't static. And so, like, my brain has learned to compensate. I found my own coping mechanisms, and I'm sure, I think that's why we like to say neurodiverse instead of just, we might be neuro-atypical, and the reason I don't like to say neurotypicals for everybody, or I want to say neurosocial, is because I don't think that everybody's brain is necessarily typical. Just because our brains are atypical from the norm, it doesn't mean that, everybody else is typical. I get that. But the reason I think that us on the spectrum are so diverse is because, think about it, if we're not able to see what everybody else sees, we're kind of developing in our own little bubble. So we're all coming up with our own coping mechanisms to figure out how to traverse the rest of the world and how to traverse social situations. And each person's going to be unique. I know for me, like, people are always telling me that I have a weird accent. Like, I grew up in Massachusetts, but I don't have a Mass accent. People say I sound Canadian sometimes. I've heard people think I have a weird European accent, some kind of like European accent. The neurologist told me I'm slightly prosodic, which is kind of, I have a musical something to my to my speech. I know that I clutter sometimes because I don't think linearly. I think in patterns. So sometimes it's difficult for me to logistically like line up my words so that they come out in a sequence that is logical for the rest of the world. So I'm always trying to figure these things out that come intuitively to everybody else. And I think that's the same for everybody on the spectrum. It just manifests differently for everybody depending on who they are and the coping mechanism. Because like I said, we're developing in our own little personal bubbles. And so, like, our speech, like, and it's also why I think some of us are slightly pedantic, is because, maybe how we learned socially is from reading all the time, watching movies and things like that, and because our brain is literal, and we take things like, because we don't have access again to that social collective, words become much more significant to us. And our brains don't like to take shortcuts. Like, I know I don't always use contractions as much as other people. I use full words. When I text, I never use any of the short, like, it's, I was talking to another Aspie once, and he was like, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we had like a social translator where we could, because we have such a difficult time truncating ourselves and editing ourselves, if we could like run our text through like this weird translator, and it would shorten what we've said so that other people will better understand us, and we could get like, it would go in the other way where like the weird short little social text that people write would run through that, and it would actually say it in like full text, literally in words that we understand. That would be pretty awesome. But I think, I'm hoping that this video will give neurotypicals, of people with a social brain, more insight into us, and to understand that we don't have that part of our brain that allows us to understand you. We are, in a way, it's like we are colorblind to you. Our ability to see the spectrum of colors and social colors that you guys have access to is we're blind to that. And if you keep putting us in mazes, social mazes with all different social colors, and ask us to traverse it, like, we're going to stumble. I mean, maybe some of us are a little bit more capable of coming up with mechanisms to figure things out, but that means we're still only going to get it like maybe like 50 to maybe 70% of the time. We're never going to be 100%. And punishing us for our behaviors because of this, the anxiety that we feel, is not going to help. I think that we can be very productive. We have a lot of gifts because of this, because our brains develop differently. We see the world very differently than all of you. I know for me, I never painted before. I started painting a few years ago, and now I love it. It's like this cathartic release. I don't think about it. It's like one of the few times I'm not in my head. I just allow the colors to do this tumultuous display of primal, this primal dance on the canvas. I don't know if maybe I'll show you guys sometime, but cause for us, like, learning in and of itself is an obsession. We don't learn for status or for gender or anything like that. The anxiety that we feel is for socially. It's not that we don't want to try to connect to other people. It's just that we're not capable of connecting in the same way that you guys do. And again, because we have that blindness, and we just want, to be understood. And I think that we can be very productive members of society, but we're always constantly being asked to understand social rules and things like that. But if we don't have access to that, then it's not going to happen. So I think that what needs to happen in society, instead of looking at us as a defect, understand that we have certain gifts that we can contribute. But in order for us to contribute, we need you to understand us the way you understand people with color blindness or with blindness or with any other type. And I don't think of it as disability in that way. It just I think of it as it has allowed our brains to develop in a different way. But in a way, it is a disability in that yes, probably in the workplace, we're going to need some accommodations when it comes to socially. We're not going to be able to play those social politics. We're not going to be able to be comfortable in all the social situations, or any of that. But we're probably not going to want to be upwardly mobile in certain things or any of that. None of those things are going to be as important to us as having a meaningful position and feeling like we're contributing in a way that makes us feel like we have a purpose. I think for most Aspies, we feel like we need to have a purpose to feel truly fulfilled and complete in our world. Without having that, we kind of feel like we're floundering and we're lost. I mean, I know schedule's a lot important to us, but I also feel like feeling we have a purpose that we've contributed in some meaningful way is very important to us. Without that, I think we feel lost. So that's all I have to say for today. I hope that's been helpful. Again, if anybody has any questions or anything, please, let me know. And I'll try to make more videos on a consistent basis. I know sometimes there's a long delay between them. I kind of climb into my little shell and hide out for a while. Again, thank you and have a good day, everybody. Bye.